short presentation on what receptive identification is and how you can use it to either teach or assess what your student knows. So receptive identification is the ability of a student to identify something without having to verbalize anything or to talk, right? So they are receptively identifying something in their visual field or maybe even their auditory field based on some instruction that is given to them. So you would require a student to have some type of selection response. So that could include a point. It could be give me, it could be touch, it could be slide that over to me, could you show me? All of those are different examples of what a selection response is. You can also think about this as eye gaze. So where is a child looking, right? You can think about their ability to manipulate their trunk and orient their body towards something or look at something, and that's another way that they could select something that's in their visual field or their auditory field. You could say, look at the window, and they would be able to move their body, and you would know that they would know what a window is. So all of those are different ways that you can select something in your visual field. So you just have to have a response that you know that the student uses to select something in their visual field. And then there are two general ways to assess and to teach receptive identification. All right, one is matching to sample and one is sorting. So when we're thinking about the teaching side of things, we often think about matching to a sample. The child is expected to point to one thing out of a visual field or an auditory field and just make one selection. So when you're thinking about matching to a sample, the sample is just basically the direction, what you are actually targeting. You could say find the same, and you could hold something up, and then the child is expected to find something that is the same. You could say match, and again, you would have some type of physical representation, and the child is expected to find something that is the same. You could have it be based on attributes or action verbs. Find one that is jumping, find one that is singing, find one that is playing, find one that is stretching. Or find them one that has blue eyes, find one that is orange, find one that is yellow, find one that's bright, find one that is small, find one that is tall, find one that is long. All of those fit into this matching to sample. They select one item. You can do it for form, so you can say find one that has 4 legs, find one that has 2 legs, find one that has a tail, find one that has floppy ears, find one that is 4 feet long. I mean, you can get pretty specific about your form, right, based on the student's ability to discriminate things. So if you're moving into measurement and math skills, you can say find one that has a multiplication in it, find one that has division in it, find one that has a fraction, find one that has a whole number. So there's multiple ways that you can do these receptive identification questions without thinking too minimally about what the student's skill levels are. You can really expand this to very complex skills. Find one that's a complete sentence. Find me a question versus a statement. All of those would fit into this form category. And then you can move into a category. So find me a vegetable, find me a fruit, find me an appliance, find me furniture, find me a writing utensil. Again, as the student progresses in their skill level, you can get finer and finer in your requirements of these discriminations. But you can also be pretty general in your discriminations as well. So this receptive identification programming grows with the student. And then you can also do find me one that has this function. So find one that you sit on, find one that you lie on, find one that you play with, find one that you eat. All of those would fit into the function. So that is more on the teaching side of things, and even maybe the assessing side of things, figuring out what your student is capable of doing, but then also teaching them new concepts, right? So basically the student may not be able to verbalize. Maybe verbalization is difficult for them, but they can do it, but over time they tire because either they stutter or they stammer. And so it's a lot easier to assess what they know through this receptive identification skill. So you're using this matching to sample side of things to teach skills, right, to assess skills. And then you move over into this other category of sorting. Sorting is when you require them to do not just one target, but several targets. So you might have the same requirement where you are sorting things into colors, but maybe instead of one target, you have 20 things out on the table and then they sort them into their colors. And you can have 2 categories, 3 categories, whatever, based on what the student does. But you're basically presenting a lot of different items and asking the student to complete the task until there's nothing more to sort on the table. You can do this with numbers, right? You can sort all things that have 5 objects in them, all things that have multiplication in the problem. You can do this by, sorting all complete sentences versus sentence fragments. You can do this with social studies where you can say, sort these into different time periods, sort these into different civics issues, sort these into different laws that occurred under different presidential, periods. All of these things can be done through a sorting task, and does not require the student to have to verbally express themselves. But again, with sorting, it's much more of a maintenance task. They already know these things, but you're asking them to develop some work tolerance. So they have that skill of identifying it receptively, but as you move into sorting, this is when a student can work independently, or you're trying to establish that skill set of being able to work independently. So they already can do the matching to sample component, but now you're trying to shift them into more independent work. Come to the table, work for me for 5 minutes. And I want you to sort these into these different groups or different categories, and then keep going until you're done. And then when you're done with it, you can assess. We can assess what you did and see if you earned a break, right? So matching a sample is this teaching side of things. Sorting is more of the working on that work tolerance, the ability to work independently, making sure we're maintaining those skills over time. But again, both of them are targeting this ability to identify things receptively without ever having the student have to verbalize themselves, express themselves. And it's a great way to work on things without tiring a student who has those difficulties using those verbal skills. So if you have questions, you can feel free to chat them down and send me an email. But receptive identification is a great way to target some vocabulary and some larger skill sets without having to require that the students speak.